our thought process. Chatting, chatting, chatting. That was all that I heard. Other people's voices talking about what was going on with me. Chapter 1. Just an ordinary life. My life, it was like any other kids my age. Movies, sports, and video games. I could tell you that I liked school, but that would be a lie. I envisioned that my life would stay normal because I had no reason to think otherwise. I never expected my life's path to change, so drastically at least. At the age of 11, what else was I to think? Things all did, though, on the day of my cousin's funeral. I felt like I wasn't a kid anymore. It was as though I lost my innocence. I knew that people died, as well as had medical issues. I was just naive in thinking that would never happen in my family, in my life. But it did. We as a family spent an entire year watching my cousin from his bedside fight leukemia. It was a battle we thought he was winning. However, everything that he did to fight off the disease was for naught. Even though to us it seemed like he was in the clear, this was a false reality, and he ended up passing away. When we returned home from Matthew, my cousin's funeral, we each sat speechless around our dining room table, exhausted, staring blankly at each other, trying to find comforting words that would erase and ease our sadness from the day. We were there, and I just had to leave to escape the heaviness that was all around me. I went into my room, laid in my bed, and just shut my eyes, hoping to wake up from this nightmare that I was having. What I didn't know was that my nightmare, it was only beginning. Upon waking up the next morning, thinking that the mood of the house would still be sad, I couldn't focus on anything but the strange pressure that was emanating from my head. It wasn't anxiety. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't a regular headache. It was different. Despite not feeling well, I still tried to go about the day like it was any other. I wanted to do something fun, like hang out with my friends, or hang out by the pool and enjoy the summer weather. I just needed to take my mind off the sadness that was all around. However, it was futile, because an overwhelming feeling of lethargy came over me. It was as though all of my energy was sucked out of my body. This was a foreign feeling to me, as I was an active kid who usually had a lot of energy. I didn't know why my body was acting that way. I just tried my hardest to pretend that I was feeling okay because I didn't want to worry my mom and add to her already immense emotional stress. But soon she caught on that something wasn't right with me. I lolled around the house acting if everything was all right, but after a while I couldn't pretend anymore. I guess I was just trying to fool my family, as well as I guess I was just trying to fool the rest of my family as well. But myself more than anyone. Just to pretend like I was okay. Like any concerned parent, my mom sensed that I wasn't feeling well and insisted on taking my temperature. However, according to that reading, I was fine. In spite of it, and my insistence that I was okay, my mom still felt that something wasn't right. She spoke with my aunt, who lived upstairs, and they thought they should take me to our local hospital to get looked at by a doctor. Other than my short stay there when I was born, I had never been there for anything else. My grandpa, or as I called him, Papa, who was there with my Nana at the time, tried to think less drastically and didn't see the need to take me to the hospital. Instead, he assumed that I was simply feeling sad and blue for my cousin's recent passing. He suggested taking me to the mall to try and get my mind off things, and everybody around was in agreement. I vaguely remember driving there with him. But what I do remember is not being able to hold my head up and having to lean against a car window for support. When we arrived, he was unable to get me more than 2 steps inside before my legs just stopped working, leaving me immobile. I became physically incapable of moving. It was frightening. We walked out of the mall, got back into the van, and drove straight home. Upon arriving back, I was met by my family's worried faces. They discussed and tried to determine what they could do to try to help me. Soon after, they came to the consensus that I needed to go to the hospital. My mom had to basically drag me into her car because I just didn't have the energy to walk myself. Only her and I went to the hospital, as we didn't want to make a big scene, in case it was nothing. I wanted to believe that the source of my fatigue was only emotional exhaustion. I didn't want to entertain the idea that it could be something more serious. The doctor on shift in the ER emergency room asked basic questions and took my vitals. Afterwards, he concluded that I had Norwalk. I didn't have any idea what Norwalk was, but based on my mom's facial expressions, I knew that she did not agree with his diagnosis. We didn't stay too long after hearing that. My mom thanked him for seeing us, and we were on our way back home. When we returned, I can remember my aunt saying that wasn't too long that we were there. But upon telling her of the diagnosis, my aunt shook her head in agreement with my mom's decision for us to leave. A short while after that, after telling my mom that I was feeling a bit better, she still took me back into her car and we were off to the next hospital's emergency room. This time, though, we were only going to one that dealt with sick kids and women. I wasn't a sick kid. I wasn't a pregnant woman, so I was pretty sure that I was going to the children's hospital. She wanted to see if my next diagnosis would be different from a disease that I could have picked up on a booze cruise to the Caribbean. After we arrived, my height and weight were taken like at the other hospital. We were told to wait to be seen by the doctor that was on shift that night in the ER. Following her resident seeing us, he told her that everything looked fine with me, and I was given the once over by the doc, where she told us that her diagnosis was migraines. Migraines caused by stress. Stress! I knew the word, but I didn't know what she was talking about. I can only assume that after she talked with the doctor and let her know about my cousin's recent passing, that she, the doctor, thought I was depressed from my mom's revelation about what had been going on. She was the head of neurology, so who was I to question her findings? She assumed that all I was feeling was, quote unquote, in my head, and my mom had jumped the gun by taking me there. My mom looked at me with eyes of confusion, but I knew that what I was feeling wasn't depression. and thought the doctor was talking nonsense. I am not a doctor, or even close to being one, but I knew that I wasn't feeling depressed. I guess just because I was so exhausted from the day, I kind of nodded my head along with what the doctor told us, pretending like she knew what she was talking about, like she knew best. A little while later, all of the fluids the dog had put me on were done. I was checked over one final time, and we were told to go back home. When that time was over, I can remember hoping that it would only be a one-night thing, and that everything would be okay after that. We got home, and I was in a trance. I just went to bed. I didn't want to deal with any of the questions or any of the situation that was going on. Upon waking up the next morning, I felt fine, like the previous night was just a freak event. But my mom took the doctor's findings of depression pretty seriously and told me that maybe I should go to my dad's house just to take my mind off of everything. I didn't think anything of it. I knew that it wasn't those emotions, but I went just to appease her. A little while later, my dad arrived and asked what I would like to do. Well, because on the previous night I was in the hospital, I wanted to just take it easy that day. When we got to his house, my stepmom prepared one of her weird concoctions of food for breakfast. But I said that I wasn't hungry, just to spare her feelings. I went about the following hours as if nothing happened in the previous night. Just trying to act normally. Later, as a suggestion, my stepmom said that I should go see an acupuncturist to try to rid me of those feelings I was going through. I don't know if you know anything about what they do, what an acupuncturist does, but I quickly found out when we got there. After my dad drove me to this healer's office, we waited in this little jasmine-scented lobby for the woman who would be doing this. It wasn't too long before my name was called, and my dad was told by this little old lady to come back in 1 hour. I sprawled out on her table, and all at once I felt these little needles being poked into me. I imagine that a lot of people swear by that method of treatment, but I am not one of them. After laying there for about an hour as a human pincushion, the acupuncture lady came back into the room, removed the needles, and we left. My dad asked me with a smile, "How'd it go?" I wanted to tell him that I thought it was a crock, but when I saw his face, I think that he already knew. We arrived back home and had something to eat, but slowly as time went by, I noticed that odd feeling come back in as well as all around my head. My dad gave me a paracetamol for the pain, and it went away for a while. But when the pill's effects wore off, I noticed that now I had a new symptom: nausea. Within that half hour, I ran to the bathroom to upchuck my lunch. And this wasn't because my stepmom's food was terrible. It was just because I had to do it. The rest of the day went on, and by the time I went to bed, I was even more curious as to what exactly was going on. I had experienced these feelings before, but they were stronger now. It was confusing. I just laid in my bed, closed my eyes, and hoped that it would be all gone by the next morning. Upon waking up, it was much as the same as the other day. I felt fine at first, but shortly after everything went bad. I seemed to be perpetually standing over the toilet, not always getting sick, but forever worried that I would be. After seeing me standing there, my dad loaded me into his car, called my mom, and told her that we were on our way back to the hospital again. It only seemed like a short amount of time to get there, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention. Nevertheless, upon our arrival, everyone else was there too. We were going through the same routine yet again. I told the nurse of my symptoms, and after we all waited for me to be seen by the doctor which was on call as well as our resident, I told them the same thing that I did the time before. They hummed and hawed for a while and told us that the fluids would fix me up good. Soon after, I remember my mom talking with the nurse, asking if anything else could be done. The nurse assured her that, like the doctor had told us, that it was only migraines caused by stress I was under. By that point, now I could see the look of doubt in my mom's eyes when she heard that diagnosis. When I became less sick, or looked less sick at least, after those fluids I was given were done, I became worried that maybe all this wasn't over. I never told my family, but I was as scared as I had ever been, not knowing what was going on. Later, when the fluids were just about done, I made a promise to myself that whatever was going on, I would not be taken down from it. We went home, and for the next few days, I felt fine. Nothing had gone on, and it was oddly quiet. But it was as though there was some kind of hex over me. And those odd feelings started to come back. I was lying in my bed, ready to fall asleep. I think the second or third day that we were home after the last time we were in the hospital. And all of a sudden, I woke up and had to run to the bathroom. I had no control. I had to throw up. My mom was sitting on the couch having a glass of wine, I guess trying to de-stress from everything that had been going on recently. And after seeing me, she ran upstairs to wake up my aunt to get us a ride to the hospital. They then came downstairs and proceeded to take me there, hoping that this time we'd get a different diagnosis. But, as it happened the previous times, we told the nurse my symptoms, or my mom did. I was just basically a puddle sitting next to my aunt as my mom talked to her. When she was done, she came in, sat with my aunt, and waited for the doctor. It was that same doctor that was on the other nights. From what I could hear from their conversation, it seemed as though my mom was talking but wasn't being heard. I guess when the doctor smelt wine on my mom's breath, she thought that my mom was just an over-concerned parent who had drank a bit too much. She was then sent outside and told to take a minute to calm down. Luckily, my aunt was with us because if not, I would have been there alone. A short while later, my grandparents came down to the hospital to check in on us and told my aunt when they arrived they saw my mom outside and asked why. They told us that she looked like she was a raging bull. She was steaming with anger. My aunt told them why. and I could see my Nana's face immediately go red. She then asked my aunt to come outside with her to have a cigarette with my mom. It was just my grandpa or papa sitting in there with me in the ER at that moment. I just laid up my head on his lap and just tried to relax amidst all of the noise and the emotion that was going on at the time. Soon after, my aunt, my mom, and my grandma, or Nana, walked back into the hospital with my mom and told my papa and I that she had calmed down. Then that same on-call doctor came in where we were in the ER, and by this point, I had my own room. It wasn't a room, it was just a bed surrounded by curtains, but it was better than nothing, I guess. She, who was there the last time and the time before that, told us with that same self-assurance that she used the last time that it was just stress as well as those bad emotions that I felt because of my cousin had just passed. I tried to tell her again that that wasn't how I was feeling, but she assured us that she was right. She and her resident, who by that point we ineffectually called him Naughty, because whatever the doc would say, he would just nod along with her. It was so frustrating. They gave me a look over, asked how it was, and still told us that it was depression. They just repeated like a broken record. I imagined that my family was feeling a little deflated by that fact, by hearing that again and again. Eventually, my dad came down to the hospital. The rest of my family went outside to have a cigarette, and my papa went to the cafe to grab a coffee. My dad and I, he and I had a moment alone. I asked him very plainly, very plainly, if what was going on with me would ever be fixed. And he didn't respond. I suppose because he didn't know what was going on either. The only thought I had in my head was the one where I would forever be a patient, not knowing what was going on. When those fluids were done, yet again, we went back home not knowing what was happening. I won't bore you again and tell you what I did in the in-between the next time I was there. But yes, it happened again too, with that same self-assurance. The doctor came in. I saw the last time. But luckily, by then, my family was all in agreement, with me thinking that something else was going on. When my mom asked the doctor to give my head a scan, the doctor told her that she didn't want to expose me to any radiation. Then, with a kind of a pompous additional comment, that doctor asked my mom if she thought that what I had was a brain tumor. My mom replied very plainly, said with the word yes. She kind of put it off as nothing, and we were sure that it wasn't. And once those fluids were done, that third time, I was asked by my nurse how I was doing. I don't know if it was out of being a smartass, but I said to her, "You tell me." The doctor came in and pulled me off to the side privately and said that lots of people were depressed after losing a family member, and that a lot of people felt the way that she thought I was feeling. As she tried to shove that topic further down into our conversation, I simply rolled my eyes. And as we left, we went home still not knowing what was taking place. If it hadn't been for my family being with me, I would have been completely off tilt. But it was my family's protective demeanor that kept me level headed during those times. Because I want to explode with the questions of what was the matter with Stephen. I wanted to know the answer to that. When we all arrived back to my mom's, we were terrified about what was taking place. I looked into each of my family's eyes, and I didn't see anger. I saw worry. I saw questions. Honestly, I don't know what I saw. I just thought of them, and as well as myself, as we all had terrified looks on our faces. When I was at home the next day, standing over the toilet, I was just in the bathroom, permanently standing there. Just worried about whether or not I would be sick again. We were so confused. My mom did the only thing that she could do to combat this, and handed me an anti-nausea pill. I remember hearing from her that she thought everything was going to be okay. I can also remember her saying that everything would be fixed soon. She said that despite us both not knowing what was going on, but those words motivated me a bit, at least. This way, which I was feeling, this way that I was feeling was on, and it just wasn't the way that I was used to. You know, I think by that point, we all didn't want to think that what I was feeling, what I was going through, what I was dealing with, could be worse than what the doctors at both hospitals told us. It seemed odd to talk about it now, because I wanted it to be the end of everything that was going on, but really it was the beginning. Not knowing is scary. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. A day or so later, it took me a couple of seconds to realize. But when I woke up, I noticed that everything was double and freaked out a little. When I got myself together, I rushed over to my mom's door and told her of my new view. She then rushed upstairs to tell my aunt, as well as my grandparents who had been staying with us, that we all needed to go to make another run to the hospital. I don't know about anyone else, because I am not them, but I hope that there might be finally a definitive answer to what exactly was going on. As we all rushed into my grandparents' van to go to the hospital, I blacked out and don't remember waking up until we arrived back at Children's Hospital. When we got there, my mom immediately went to the front desk to tell them about this new symptom. And when she did, immediately after, a nurse came in with a wheelchair to take me down to get a CAT scan. I imagine that my family all gasped sighs of relief when that happened. By the time the results were back, I was back to normal at least. Or at least what normal felt like compared to what I was feeling. And wondered what happened. When we got the results back, the same doctor who was on call each of the other nights told us in this little room that we were all in that what I had was a brain tumor. I guess as a kind of positive side effect of being told for so long that what I was experiencing was in my head by the doctor, my family wasn't sad when they heard that, but finally justified in their worries. That doctor also told us that it had been most likely causing all my recent symptoms. I didn't have the energy or the wits at the time to ask the doctor if she still thought I was depressed, but I could tell that my Nana wanted to. She looked like a raging bull. It was a funny moment too because she is just this little 5-foot woman. And you wouldn't think that someone like that would be feeling, or that would be getting all angry and all mad and everything. She later told me that she didn't want to make a scene because we're all in a state of shock, especially my mom and I. We're apologized to, and then after we got told that later I would have another appointment with a surgeon who would tell us a plan for me. Well, there wasn't too much jumping for joy when we finally found out what was going on. I wanted to think that things like this didn't happen to people like me, because I was just your average kid who played soccer every fall. We were acting like zombies after hearing the news. We just sat there in shock while being told that the following day everything would begin.